Roy Rogers, forever crowned the king of Cowboys, wasn't just a star, he was a full-blown American legend. With his white hat, charming smile, and trusty horse trigger, he ruled the airwaves and movie screens for decades. From the 1930s honky-tonk stages to the golden age of Hollywood westerns in the 50s and 60s, Roy was everywhere, singing, riding, and capturing hearts. He stood tall as a symbol of wholesome Americana, a man millions admired. But while the cameras captured a picture-perfect cowboy, the man behind the scenes was far more complicated. For years, parts of Roy's private life were carefully kept under wraps. Until now, his own daughter has come forward, breaking years of silence to reveal the side of her father the public never saw. And what she shared, let's just say, it's not what you'd expect. So what did Cheryl Darlene Rogers say about her father? Join us as we get into all the details. Roy Rogers, the man, the legend. The image of Roy Rogers that lives in the hearts of millions is crystal clear. The singing cowboy in the white Stetson, the clean-cut hero riding across the silver screen, the idol of kids who watched him on television or caught his matinee movies on Saturday mornings. They carried his lunch pails, flipped through his comic books, and dreamed of galloping off into the sunset just like him. He wasn't just a star, he was an icon. Roy stood for all the right things: kindness, courage, and decency. But just because he upheld the same upstanding values off-screen didn't mean life spared him the pain and heartbreak that so often shadows Hollywood legends. Behind the broad smile and the good guy roles was a man whose story ran far deeper than most fans ever imagined. Before the fame, before Trigger and the 10-gallon hat, Roy Rogers was just Leonard Franklin Sly, a boy from Cincinnati, Ohio. He was born to Maddie and Andrew "Andy" Sly in a run-down tenement on 2nd Street, a place that would eventually be buried beneath Riverfront Stadium. Years later, Roy liked to joke that he'd been born on second base. Len, as he was called then, had 3 sisters: Kathleen, Mary, and Cleta. His father Andy didn't take well to city life. In 1912, fed up with the grind, Andy and his brother Will built a 12-by-50-foot houseboat from salvaged lumber. That July, the Sly family set off up the Ohio River toward Portsmouth in search of something better. They found land and planned to build a house. But when the Great Flood of 1913 hit, they floated the houseboat onto the property and just kept living in it, on dry land. In 1919, the family finally settled on a farm in Duck Run, near Lucasville, Ohio. They built a modest 6-room house and tried to make it work. But farm life didn't pay the bills, so Andy took a job at a shoe factory in Portsmouth. He lived in the city during the week, coming home on weekends with small gifts for the kids. One weekend, he brought a horse, something that would change Len's life forever. Out on that farm, the Slys didn't have a radio. Entertainment came from within. On Saturday nights, they'd host square dances. Len would play the mandolin, sing, and even call the dances himself. It was during those nights that he began to discover his love for performing. He also learned to yodel, a skill he practiced with his mother. They used yodels to call to each other across the fields, a playful form of communication that would one day become part of his trademark sound. Len started high school in McDermott, Ohio, but after 2 years, the family returned to Cincinnati because money was tight. His father was back at the shoe factory, and Len soon joined him, leaving school behind to help support the family. He tried to go to night school, but exhaustion took its toll. When he started falling asleep in class and got laughed at for it, he dropped out and never went back. In 1929, after Len's sister Mary moved to Lawndale, California, he and his father quit their jobs, packed their old Dodge, and headed west to visit her. They stayed 4 months before returning to Ohio. But by then, something had shifted. Soon after, Len returned to California with Mary's father-in-law, and the rest of the family followed in the spring of 1930. They rented a small house near Mary, and Len and his father found work hauling gravel for a highway construction project. That job didn't last. By spring 1931, the company had gone under, and Len was out of work. He traveled to Tulare and found a back-breaking job picking peaches for Del Monte. He lived in a labor camp that looked like something out of The Grapes of Wrath. The Great Depression didn't care if you were in Ohio or California. It hit hard everywhere. And before Roy Rogers became the smiling cowboy in the white hat, he was just Len Sly, tired, broke, and dreaming of something bigger. Roy Rogers, remarkable career. After 19-year-old Len returned to Lawndale, his sister Mary encouraged him to audition for the Midnight Frolic radio program on KMCS in Inglewood. A few nights later, wearing a Western shirt Mary had sewn for him, he pushed through his shyness and stepped up to the microphone. He played the guitar, sang, and yodeled his heart out. Not long after, he got an invitation to join a local country music group called the Rocky Mountaineers. He accepted and officially became a member in August 1931. By September, Len brought in Canadian-born Bob Nolan, who had answered a classified ad in the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner that read, "Yodeler for old-time act to travel. Tenor preferred." Nolan didn't stick around long, but he and Len kept in touch. Tim Spencer came in to replace him. In the spring of 1932, Len, Spencer, and a singer named Slumber Nichols decided to break away from the Rocky Mountaineers and try forming a trio. But that didn't last either. Over the next several months, Len and Spencer bounced between short-lived bands like the International Cowboys and the O-Bar-O Cowboys. When Spencer took a break from music, Len joined Jack Lefevre and his Texas Outlaws, a well-known act on Los Angeles radio. Then came 1933. Len reconnected with both Nolan and Spencer, and the three of them formed the Pioneers Trio. Len played guitar, Nolan handled the string bass, and Spencer took the lead vocals. They rehearsed for weeks, honing their harmonies and tightening their sound. During this period, Len continued performing on radio, while Nolan and Spencer focused on songwriting for the group. By early 1934, fiddle player Hugh Farr came on board, bringing a strong bass voice to their vocals. Later that year, during a radio broadcast, an announcer said the trio sounded too young to be pioneers and suggested a new name, the Sons of the Pioneers. It stuck. The group was no longer just a trio, and the new name suited them perfectly. By summer 1934, the Sons of the Pioneers were gaining popularity beyond the Los Angeles area. Their short syndicated radio segments were being replayed across the country. That same year, they signed a recording contract with the newly formed Decca label. On August 8, 1934, they made their first commercial recordings. One of the songs recorded that day was "Tumbling Tumbleweeds," written by Bob Nolan. Over the next 2 years, they recorded 32 songs for Decca, including the beloved Western ballad "Cool Water." Len's film debut came in 1935. He was billed as Leonard Sly in a Gene Autry movie, playing a singing cowboy in a supporting role. Then, in 1938, Autry pushed for a higher salary, prompting Republic Pictures to start looking for a new singing cowboy. Someone talented but cheaper. Many hopefuls auditioned, including Willie Phelps of the Phelps Brothers, but Len won the role. Republic gave him a new name, Roy Rogers. Roy had that Western charm, and Rogers honored Will Rogers, the beloved cowboy humorist. He landed the lead role in Under Western Stars and quickly became a box office draw. He went head-to-head with Autry as America's top singing cowboy. In 1940, he appeared in Dark Command alongside John Wayne and future sidekick George "Gabby" Hayes. Rogers was rising fast, and unlike most actors, he often played a character with his own name, just like Autry. From 1939 to 1954, Roy Rogers held a spot on the Motion Picture Herald's Top 10 Money-Making Western Stars list. From 1943 to 1954, he held the #1 spot. He also ranked in the box office magazine poll from 1938 through 1955, again dominating from 1943 to 1952. In 1945 and 1946, he even broke into the top 10 money-making stars list for all films, not just westerns. Kids across America adored him. Unlike most B-westerns, Roy's post-war films were shot in vivid true color. Some even had animal-focused adventures where his horse, Trigger, became the star for a stretch. Roy also knew the business side of fame. In 1940, he made sure his Republic contract gave him full control over his voice, name, and likeness for merchandise. That move paid off. Soon, his image was everywhere. On action figures, cowboy novels, comic books, lunchboxes, and more. He was second only to Walt Disney when it came to branded merchandise. In 1944, he met Dale Evans while filming a movie. Together, they became fierce advocates for adoption and children's charities. They adopted several children themselves and remained outspoken Christians throughout their marriage. In 1949, they joined the Hollywood Christian Group, hosted in the home of Henrietta Mears and later at the house of Louis Evans Jr. Members included Billy Graham and Jane Russell. That same group would eventually evolve into Bel Air Church. Their signature song, Happy Trails, was written by Evans. They sang it at the close of every episode of their TV show. In 1962, the Roy Rogers and Dale Evans show aired on ABC. It lasted only 3 months before being canceled, losing out in the ratings to The Jackie Gleason Show. Roy made frequent TV appearances in later years, often playing himself or cowboy-themed roles. He even guest-starred on an episode of Wonder Woman titled The Bushwhackers. He also ran his own Hollywood production company, which not only handled his shows but also produced series like Brave Eagle on CBS from 1955 to 1956. In 1968, Rogers licensed his name to the Marriott Corporation, which transformed its hot shops into Roy Rogers Restaurants. While he didn't directly manage the chain, his name was on every sign. He returned to Lubbock in 1970 to headline the Texas Tech University Intercollegiate Rodeo with Dale. His final film, Macintosh and TJ, was filmed in 1975 at the legendary 6,666 Ranch in King County, just miles from the old O-Bar-O Ranch in Kent County, where part of his story had first begun. But while Roy's professional life was somewhat steady, the same cannot be said about his love life. Roy Rogers' marriage. To S. Roy Rogers' first wife, Lucille Escalise, was more than just a fan. She had fallen for him before the fame, back when he was still clawing his way through the music scene. After a year of dating, the two tied the knot in 1933 in a modest civil ceremony. But what started with hope and affection unraveled under the weight of ambition and the uncertainty of Rogers' rising career. The marriage grew strained and eventually ended in divorce in 1936. It was a short chapter, but one that marked the beginning of a personal journey Rogers would keep navigating for years. Later that same year, fate stepped in again, this time in Roswell, New Mexico. Rogers had been performing with the O-Bar-O Cowboys when a young woman named Grace Arlene Wilkins called into a local radio station. She promised to bake him a pie if he sang the Swiss Yodel. That simple gesture kicked off something that quickly grew into something deeper. On June 11, 1936, just months after his divorce, Roy and Arlene got married in Roswell. Despite the whirlwind pace, their bond proved real and strong. The early years of their marriage were beautiful. Roy's entertainment career was still in its infancy, but Arlene stood by him through the tough times. In 1941, after years of trying to expand their family, the couple adopted a baby girl, Cheryl Darlene. Parenthood suited them. Encouraged by the joy Cheryl brought, Roy and Arlene decided to grow their family further. 2 years later, they had a biological daughter, Linda Lou, and in 1946, they welcomed their son, Roy Rogers Jr. affectionately called Dusty. Life seemed picture perfect, but tragedy struck just days after Dusty's birth. Arlene developed complications and passed away, leaving Roy devastated and alone with 3 children. He was now a widower in the midst of a skyrocketing career, his heart broken even as Hollywood came calling. But life, as it often does, had more in store. Enter Dale Evans. She was the queen of the West, and he was the king of the Cowboys. Their chemistry wasn't just scripted, it was unmistakable from the moment they shared the screen in The Cowboy and the Señorita. Dale Evans had dreams of Broadway, and this Western role was supposed to be a stepping stone, not a lifelong partnership. Yet, the connection between her and Roy was magnetic. The studio noticed and quickly signed them on for 7 more films together. Over time, their friendship evolved into something deeper. Roy was still mourning Arlene, but Dale brought warmth and laughter into his life again. They shared similar values, both having endured personal heartbreak and loss. Roy had 3 children to care for, and Dale embraced them like her own. For a long while, the pair kept things professional, but the bond was undeniable. By 1947, during a rodeo in Chicago, Roy made his move, sitting atop Trigger, his beloved horse. Just moments before he was due in the arena, he turned to Dale and asked her to marry him. It was so spontaneous, so Roy. Dale barely had time to react before he galloped into the spotlight. Their wedding was held later that year, on New Year's Eve, at a ranch in Oklahoma, where they were filming their 17th movie together, Home in Oklahoma. Despite their fame, the ceremony was intimate. Their agent, Art Rush, served as best man, and his wife, Mary Jo, was the matron of honor. Tabloids had speculated that Trigger would be part of the ceremony, and that Dale would wear a flashy red sequined gown. None of that happened. What did happen was even better: a union built on mutual respect, faith, and an unwavering love for family. Not everyone was thrilled, though. Roy had millions of devoted female fans, many of whom genuinely believed he might show up on horseback and whisk them away. Dale received stacks of letters from heartbroken admirers who felt betrayed. But Roy had made his choice, and it was Dale. Together, they became a symbol of love and partnership, in an industry often short on both. Over the next several decades, Roy and Dale created a life full of purpose and heart. They starred in 29 films and recorded over 200 albums together. But beyond the glitz, they gave their time to causes close to their hearts. They regularly visited orphanages and children's hospitals, and they practiced what they preached. They adopted 4 children and had 1 biological child together. Sadly, one of their daughters, Robin Elizabeth, was born with Down syndrome and died before her 2nd birthday due to complications from mumps. Dale poured her grief into a book called Angel Unaware, a heartfelt tribute that touched the lives of millions and brought attention to children with disabilities. Faith anchored their marriage. They prayed together, leaned on scripture during tough times, and always saw their blessings as something to be shared. They weren't just partners in film and music. They were soulmates. They had the kind of marriage that people still talk about, one that was filled with laughter, music, and deep admiration. Dale may not have been a natural horseback rider when they met, and Roy and Gabby Hayes teased her endlessly for it. But she eventually grew into the role. What started as on-screen banter became real-life affection. Even after the cameras stopped rolling, Roy and Dale remained inseparable. They adored their children and built a home life that, while not without sorrow, was rich with love. The pain of losing 3 children only brought them closer together. Their shared grief became another layer in their bond, reinforcing the strength of their commitment. More than 75 years after their wedding, their names are still linked in the hearts of fans. When people say Roy Rogers, Dale Evans is never far behind. Together, they weren't just Hollywood royalty, they were the real deal. But beyond the fame, beyond the matching cowboy hats and silver screen smiles, Roy's most treasured role was far more personal: being a father. Who is Roy Rogers' daughter? Cheryl Rogers Barnett is the adopted daughter of Roy Rogers and his second wife Arlene, and the eldest of the Rogers children. Her adoption story has long been part of the family's lore. While on a personal appearance tour in Texas, Roy made a stop in Dallas and visited Hope Cottage, a home for babies. As he would later recall, most of the infants cried when he leaned over their cribs and tickled them, except one. A baby girl reached out, grabbed his finger, smiled and cooed. That baby was Cheryl. For Roy, it was love at first sight. Cheryl's acting career began early, but remained brief. As a toddler, she appeared in the feature film Meet Roy Rogers. At age 10, she had a small line in Trail of Robin Hood. And during her teen years, she appeared in an episode of the Roy Rogers TV show titled Outlaws of Paradise Valley. Like her siblings, Cheryl also appeared in several television variety shows and numerous commercials, both as a child and later with her own children. Beyond her early acting experiences, Cheryl pursued writing and media production. She is the author of Cowboy Princess and Cowboy Princess Rides Again, as well as co-author of the All-American Cowboy Grill, a cookbook inspired by her family's legacy. Her written work also includes published articles in various magazines, along with forewords and liner notes for books and CDs that honor the careers of her parents. Alongside her husband, Larry, Cheryl co-produced 2 documentaries, Roy Rogers, In His Own Words, and Dale Evans, A Most Remarkable Woman. Both are available on DVD through their official online store. Her media appearances include being a featured guest in the History Channel special When Cowboys Were King, and serving as a presenter at the 2nd Annual Turner Classic Movies Festival in Hollywood, where she introduced 4 of her father's films and 1 of her mother's. Cheryl has also participated in the Traverse City Film Festival, introducing 2 more of Roy Rogers' movies. Additionally, she was invited to speak at Brigham Young University on the topic, Who was Roy Rogers and Why Should We Care? She has conducted one-on-one interviews with numerous film and television personalities, many of whom appeared at the Lone Pine Film Festival in California and the Western Legends Roundup in Canab, Utah. These include interviews with Robert Fuller, Red Steagall, Buck Taylor, Peggy Stewart, and Denny Miller, among others. Interviews still awaiting release feature Hugh O'Brien, Stella Stevens, Perry King, Andrew Prine, and several more. Today, Cheryl remains active on the Western Festival circuit, often speaking at events, RV parks, and retirement communities throughout the western United States. She and her husband now reside in Washington, Utah. Together, they have 7 grown children, 18 grandchildren, and 12 great-grandchildren, whose homes stretch from coast to coast. What has Cheryl Rogers said about her father? Roy Rogers may be remembered as a singing cowboy and star of nearly 100 films between the 1930s and 1950s. But to his eldest daughter, Cheryl Rogers Barnett, he was something more personal. A mischievous kid with a big heart. Cheryl and her husband, Larry Barnett, were in Sedona for a special screening of Don't Fence Me In, one of Rogers' 1945 films presented as part of a film festival. She shared stories of her father's life, both as a Hollywood icon and as the man she knew behind the scenes. While Rogers was best known to the public as a clean-cut cowboy hero, his daughter remembered another side. He had a sharp comedic timing and a habit of delivering quick one-liners, especially during tense or frustrating moments. Cheryl recalled that it was those well-timed jokes that helped him stay in his wife's good graces. One of his favorite lines, which always seemed to charm Dale, was, "You can take the kid out of the man, but you haven't got much left." Of all her father's work, Don't Fence Me In remains her favorite. She particularly admired the role of Gabby Hayes, the beloved sidekick character. "They didn't let him bumble in that and get Dad in trouble," she said. "They really let him shine in that. He was a consummate actor." Off-screen, Roy Rogers was known for holding on to just about everything. According to Cheryl, he was a dedicated collector, keeping posters, costumes, photos, and memorabilia from his decades-long career. He also had a passion for collecting cars, boats, guns, and sports artifacts. "Dad never threw anything away in his life," she recalled. Whenever the growing collections overwhelmed the house, Dale Evans would call Beacon's van and storage to haul items off, hoping to restore some order. Eventually, Rogers bought an abandoned bowling alley in Vacaville, California, and transformed it into a museum dedicated to his life and legacy. In the back room, he kept enough stuff for another museum, Larry Barnett added. Among the museum's most famous exhibits were Trigger, Rogers' loyal Palomino horse, and Bullet, the family's German shepherd. Both animals were preserved after their deaths and became part of the museum display. In later years, they were acquired by RFD-TV in Omaha, Nebraska, and still travel globally for special exhibits. Despite his public image, Rogers was, by nature, a shy man, unless the conversation turned to horses, firearms, or his musical roots with the Sons of the Pioneers. Cheryl noted that while he preferred to stay in the background, Dale was the extrovert. Mom was the outgoing one. She would zero in on you and look you in the eye. Dale Evans had a strong personality and loved a good debate. She was known for her wit and humor, though not necessarily for delivering jokes well. Larry Barnett remembered quickly figuring that out. "If you kept a straight face, you could take her around the block," he joked. For Cheryl, her father never quite fit into the category of actor. He was simply her dad. But one moment in particular shifted her perspective. In 1975, when the family previewed rough cuts of Macintosh and TJ, a rare dramatic role for Rogers, she turned to her mother and said in surprise, "He really could act." Roy Rogers, sitting nearby, responded with a wry smile, "I guess I learned something all those years." He passed away in 1998. After his death, Cheryl was encouraged to write a memoir, being the only child who had grown up during the height of her parents' fame. She hesitated at first, but was eventually persuaded when Larry convinced Dale Evans to write the foreword. Sadly, Evans died about 6 months later, but her contribution gave Cheryl the push she needed to finish the book. In 2003, Cowboy Princess: Life with My Parents, Roy Rogers and Dale Evans was published. The memoir was praised by critics as one of the most insightful and intimate biographies ever written about the beloved Western stars. The many troubles of Roy Rogers' life. Roy Rogers and Dale Evans were more than Hollywood's golden couple. They were living proof that love and work could go hand in hand. Over a marriage that spanned 5 decades, they not only built an empire together in film and television, but they also built a family. The couple had 1 biological child and adopted 4 more. But behind the smiling faces on screen, their lives were marked by deep, personal heartbreaks that tested them in ways few could imagine. One of their adopted children, Robin Elizabeth, was born with Down syndrome. Rogers and Evans embraced her with the same fierce devotion they gave all their children. But just before her 2nd birthday, Robin contracted the mumps. Complications followed, and in a cruel twist of fate, the little girl passed away. Her death shattered them. It was the kind of loss no parent ever fully recovers from. Dale Evans, who had always been the stronger voice in public, tried to make sense of the tragedy by turning to her faith. She eventually poured her grief onto the page in her moving book, Angel Unaware, written from Robin's imagined point of view. It was her way of finding peace and keeping Robin's memory alive. But even decades later, both Dale and Roy still carried the weight of that pain. They tried to stay strong for their remaining children. In addition to Robin, they had adopted 3 girls, Mimi, Dodie, and Debbie, and 1 boy, Sandy. With their growing brood, they needed more room to breathe. Roy had just the place in mind. He wasn't just playing the cowboy on screen, he lived the part. In 1955, Roy bought a 300-acre ranch in the California hills, just outside of Chatsworth. It was picture perfect, like something lifted straight out of one of his westerns. At the top of the property stood a sprawling hilltop ranch house, where the family tried to build a new normal. But normal would remain elusive. In 1964, heartbreak struck again. Debbie, one of their adopted daughters, had gone on a church outing. The bus she was on crashed. Debbie was among those who didn't survive. The news was another devastating blow, an unthinkable second loss of a child. After the accident, Roy moved the family again, this time to the Double R Bar Ranch in Apple Valley, California. The move was as much about finding peace as it was about space. Through it all, faith became Roy's anchor. A devout Christian throughout his life, Roy didn't just keep his beliefs behind closed doors. As early as 1949, he and Dale joined the Hollywood Christian Group, a community of actors and entertainers who shared their spiritual convictions. Whether on set or at home, Roy leaned heavily on his faith to get through the darkest days. Despite the tragedies, Roy continued to live a full life. His career never quite slowed, and neither did the love and admiration people felt for him. When he passed away at 86 from congestive heart failure, it marked the end of an era. Dale and their children laid him to rest at Sunset Hills Memorial Park in Apple Valley, California, a quiet spot far from the lights of Hollywood. But Roy Rogers' true legacy lives on not just in the hearts of his family, but among the stars, literally. While most actors dream of earning a single star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, Roy Rogers earned 3. One for radio, one for television, one for film. It was a fitting tribute for a man who had conquered every corner of entertainment and did it all while staying true to his values. He wasn't just the king of the Cowboys. He was, and remains, one of the most beloved icons the West and Hollywood ever knew. Growing up, were you a fan of Roy Rogers? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. And click the next video on your screen. You'll enjoy it.